Greetings you beautiful people. In this video we're going to be taking a look at a new colour recipe for the Blood Angels, and I'll also be going into detail on how we can make the armour look a little bit more grimdark, and most of all we'll be paying special attention to surface finish variation. So let's quickly talk about the build itself and some things I've added. So as you can see, there is some liquid green stuff, and again I just stipple this into certain places where I want the armour to have just a slight bit of corrosion. This won't be rust or anything, this will just be like pitting and mottling on the armour itself as though that paint has started to peel. And again I've just added some little bits of trinkets from the new Blood Angels upgrade sprue, and also some little wires just to make it that little bit more interesting. Now, as I always do in my videos, I always go on to alternative colour recipes, so that, because I know a lot of people don't have airbrushes and all that sort of stuff, so I like to give a couple of different options. Now, you'll know previously, if you want to go and check it out, I did a Blood Angels video where it involves no airbrushing, it's just all done via stippling and a dry brush. So if you want to go and check that video out, please do. Alternatively, you could just spray this up in something like the Mephiston Red from Citadel spray, or the Colour Forger's Sanguine Red, which is the alternative, and then you can follow the rest of the tutorial. However, the colour scheme that I have is like a new one that I've been playing with, and I love the deep reds that you get with it. So first thing we need to do is prime up our miniature in any black primer. I've used Stynalrez black primer. Then we're going to get like a medium grey, and in a zenathol, so our goal here is to create a zenathol highlight. So I've got the Stynalrez grey primer, and I've just given it like a zenathol of that. And then I've also added, for the brighter spots, some white, and you can do this with whatever colour white, as long as you've got like this nice zenathol transition. And again, you could even dry brush it at this stage if you want to do that. Next up comes the most beautiful and transformative part of this project, which is getting our red on. And it's very simple. All I've got through my airbrush is the contrast paint Flesh Terras red. Now you might think, why didn't I use the Blood Angels one? It's just, for me, the Flesh Terras one just has that little bit more of like a nicer, deeper red saturation. However, if you do like the look of the Blood Angels red, feel free to do that as well. But I've just loaded some up in my airbrush with a couple of drops of thinner to about 5 drops of the Flesh Terras red itself, and I'm just very lightly just building it up and working my way around the miniature. You will notice when you first put it on, it goes a bit like a dully desaturated reddy orange, but as you start to build up those layers, you'll really start to see that saturation punch through, and everything will look beautiful. With all that out of the way, let's get on to some base coats. So all the gold accents were painted in scale colour 75 elven gold, and this was just applied into all the areas. All silver areas were painted in pro acryl silver and given a dry brush of fang steel. All the pouches and leather areas were painted in AK Grim Brown and then highlighted up with Citadel Scrag Brown. All skulls were base coated in AK Dark Brown and highlighted with Karak Stone, and to give these a bit of variation, I gave some of the skulls a wash of Seraphim Sepia. All the tabards and candles were all given the same treatment, apart from they had some Wraithbone as a final highlight. Any of the Blood Angels like decorations were painted in bold titanium white by Pro Acryl, and it is the best white in my eyes. Really quickly, before we get into the rest of the video, you know what time it is. It's ad time / promotion time. So this week I want to quickly tell you about my new recent video over at the Grimdark Compendium. We paint up and kit bash one of the new Death Company. So if you're into your Blood Angels and you've liked this video and you want to head over there and check that out, or if you're just looking for a cool Grimdark black armor recipe, then head over there and check that out as well for the Death Company. Also, over at the Grimdark Compendium, we do have a catalogue of courses that you can go over and check out. I'd highly recommend the new Bestiarum course because some of the techniques that get taught in there are absolutely out of this world. And obviously, if you do want to grab yourself some villainy inks, I do have affiliate links to both Element Games and also the Grimdark Compendium itself. So if you want to head over there and grab some, you can do that. But if you want to learn more about the inks themselves, then check out the Grimdark Compendium's YouTube page, where they've got a video explaining all its uses and some of the amazing things that you can do with them. And also be sure to check out our resources page over at the Grimdark Compendium. Now that we've got all the main colours out of the way, we can start to move into our Unifying Wash. And this is typically what I like to do when painting my miniatures. I like to get them to a stage where the sort of everything's base coated out, and then we can move into like actually doing it, making it a lot more grimdark. So I'm going to come in with Villainy Inks Goon's Grime, and again I've got this through an airbrush that you can use it via a brush application. However, I like to do it via an airbrush, and I've thinned this 1:1 ratio, so I've got like the same and equal amounts of parts of mineral spirits to the Goon's Grime, and I'm just applying it in layers, working my way around it. Now, the reason I apply it through an airbrush is because, one, it gives me this nice even coat in and around the miniature, and for areas such as like down at the legs or that I might want to be a little bit more grimy, I can do like a second coat just to make it a little bit bigger and thicker and darker. And once you've completed that application, give it around 10 to 15 minutes to dry, and you can use a blow dryer to speed up that process. But the beauty of enamels is that you can reactivate them. So if I get some mineral spirits on like a sponge or a Q-tip, then I can come in and start to dab, reactivate it and pull it away. And this is what I like to start to do in and around my miniature. Now, I do jump between a Q-tip and a sponge. I'd always recommend starting off with Q-tips, as the sponge tend to absorb a little bit more than usual, but over time you'll build up muscle memory like I have, and just getting a small amount on the end of your sponge and just pushing that pigment about. And that's really the goal at this stage. Is the Unifying Wash is just going to act as like an overall wash, like it would be a Grax Earthshade or anything like that, but because it's an enamel, it gives us that more realistic dusty appearance. And that's what I'm aiming for with this, is just to add a little bit of grime into the crevice areas and also push some of the like dusty pigmented parts onto other panels. And speaking of panels, we need to start to do a little bit of panel lining, as the Goon's Grime is not deep enough or contrasty enough for what I'm trying to achieve with the red armour. You can apply it neat out of the bottle and you will get a darker appearance, but I really want to push that contrast and talk about Ichor of the Damned. Now, Ichor of the Damned again is a Villainy Inks. It's a special effects one, which is typically designed for like skin applications. However, there are some little tricks and tips that we can use to use it as a panel lining. Now, I'm not being super accurate here on what I do, and the best tip I can give you is treat these like any acrylic paint. So I've got like a flat palette here, you can use a tile or anything along those lines, and I've laid out a little bit, and I'm going to use my mineral spirits as the water, like you would an acrylic paint, to start to thin it. Now, the trick to Ichor of the Damned is to thin it 2:1, and that way we're going to get rid of some of that satin and glossiness, and it's going to lean and dry more onto the matte side, and plus it's going to have a little bit of like runniness to it because of the mineral spirits, which is going to help go into all those crevices. So I'll just start to get myself a thin brush and work my way around, just dabbing it and dotting it. And because we've got that Goon's Grime on there, and at this phase it's not fully cured, on some areas it'll start to play with that Goon's Grime and you'll get these really nice unique effects. And again, if you want to darken up any areas, you can give it a second coat. But where it really comes in, because we've done this in a sort of a messy way and we've got some like overspill, in some areas I do like this as though it's got like some oil staining in and around the miniature. But what you can do once it's dry is just get some clean mineral spirits on your brush and start to push and feather that Ichor of the Damned back into the actual crevices if you want like a nice solid line. But for me, I do like to leave some areas a little bit like stained and oily, and this overall just adds to the grimdark feel that we're trying to to achieve. Now, if you don't add as much mineral spirits, which is what I do in some areas, then it will dry more on the satin side, which I do recommend having throughout your miniature, especially like around the legs or areas that might have a little bit of oil coming out, and it's going to appear to be a little bit more on like the wet side, which then gives us that beautiful surface finish variation that I was talking about, which is my goal throughout this video. Next up, we're going to add some chips to the armour, and again you can do this via brush or by the sponge technique, but one tip I will give you for red armour is, because again I'm going for that contrast, Rhinox hide, which is normally what we do chipping with, doesn't always show up the best on red armour. So what I like to do is just use black. So I'll go in and start to chip areas with some black, and then I like to come in with something like Iron Warriors or like a darker gunmetal grey colour and start to add some metal as though like it's gone down to the bare metal. And you can do this in like a dry brushing motion if you want to do that, or again with the chips. I'm not doing every single one, just some on main corners that naturally would start to accumulate all this like dirt and grime, and especially places like the legs, that's where you're going to get more of your chips. But just pay attention, like if you were a space marine and you were crawling on ground, you'd naturally have some chips and stuff in and around your elbows, or if he's sliding on his backpack, you might have some scratches on there as well. But just really think about what it is and what the miniature's doing and where it might have been, and that'll help you to create your chips and your little masterpiece. The last tip and technique I'd like to share with you guys is obviously candles. Now we've got our base coats down on there, and you can see I've got these really nice like streaks coming down it, and for this I'm going to use an oil paint, which is Abtalon 502's Dust. Now you can get a colour that's similar to that if you want your candles to be a little bit of a different colour, but the reason we've gone for an oil paint is for the specific properties of the oil paint, because it can be reactivated. And what we're going to do is, once we've added, it's a bit like doing rust streaks essentially, so once you've added some of these white streaks down, we're going to come in with some mineral spirits and start to manipulate them, drag them down so it softens them out. And because it's an oil paint, after 24 hours it'll dry like this really nice matte in some of the thinned areas, and then the other areas will dry like a glossy waxy style. The last tip I'll give you is, depending on whatever basing scheme that you like to do, I just gave this a dry brush of like some random oils and browns that we've used throughout it. It was just a really quick, easy base. But one thing I like to add to mine is some pigment powders. This just ties it into the base, pushes that surface finish variation. God, that's a tongue twister. And what I do, I brush it up onto the legs as well to make it look like this guy's actually been lived in this area, and he's got like a bit of dust going up his feet. And that brings us to the end of this tutorial. I know I've not gone into detail and covered absolutely everything, including like the eyes, but I've got plenty of videos on this channel where I explain how to do like lenses and all that sort of good stuff. So if you want to go over and check some of them out, I'd highly recommend it. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. I know it's been a bit of a quick one, and again, don't forget to check out the Death Company video over on the Grimdark compendium that releases this weekend. A link to that will be in the description box below, so be sure to check that out. But most of all, guys, it'd really help me out if you could help me get this video out there. Either share it on your socials, on your stories, or anything like that. But most of all, make sure you are hitting that like button. Leave me a comment, let me know what you think. But until next time, guys, I'll catch you in my next video.